The pinnacle of American endurance racing, the American cousin Colton, if you will, the North American Sportscar Championship, known as the IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship, is the only other current series in the world, besides the WEC, to host the iconic Hypercar category. In this case, however, we call it the GTP category, which shows us a completely new and unique perspective of racing as opposed to its World Series counterpart. My name is Teresa.
And I'm Sebi.
And this is the Everything Endurance Racing podcast, where today we're going to be talking about the American style of sports car racing and the IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship, to be more precise.
Yes, so IMSA is one of my absolute favorite championships in the world right now, because it combines everything that makes WEC great with like dentists and LMP2, but that's something for later. I'm gonna be starting out by highlighting some of the key differences between WEC and IMSA to begin with. So one of like the major differences is that IMSA only runs in the US and Canada, whereas WEC, obviously because it's a World Endurance Championship, runs races in the entire world. IMSA also has pretty different formats when it comes to racing. They not only race endurance races, as in like races that are more than 4 hours long, they also have shorter sprint races of like maximum 100 minutes and longer endurance races, 24-hour races like the 24-hour of Daytona. They have an additional car class. They do race the LMP2 class, which WEC unfortunately dropped to make space for the more hypercars and more GT3 cars. But they also race the GT3 cars and the hypercar LMDH, but they call it GTP. The GTD class, or like the GT3 class, is divided into a full pro class with like 3 pros on the car or 2 pros on the car, and a non-pro category, which has at least one amateur driver, if you will, on the car. And most of LP2 is stuffed with dentists. We love it.
Would you maybe want to explain what you mean by dentists? Because yes, most of these drivers are actually dentists by profession, but explain.
The dentist reference is like a joke going on in the IMSA community, where it's basically pay drivers that paid their way into racing, and some of them are actually dentists, so that mean comes from there. They used to race in LMP3, but now that they dropped LMP3, they switched to LMP2, and it's still just as shitty in most cases.
It's definitely fun to watch, and it makes the racing more exciting. But it sounds very complicated. But yeah, IMSA has 4 classes. And we're going to be talking mainly about the hypercars, because that's what makes endurance racing the most exciting nowadays, basically with all the manufacturer diversity and the new rules. So as we have talked in the last episode about WEC, there's 2 different sets of regulations for hypercars nowadays. The LMH regulations and the LMDH regulations. Basically, the LMDH regulations are a bit more affordable, and what they allow you to do is to race in both WEC and IMSA, as opposed to LMH. LMH only allows you to race in WEC, basically.
Yes, basically. That's the key factor. If you make a certain amount of street cars per year, unrelated to your hypercar that you want to enter, you can also race your LMH car in IMSA.
Yes, that's why I said basically, because there's a few other rules to that. But that ultimately means that we have less hypercars in less manufacturers in IMSA than WEC. We have 7 manufacturers in IMSA. In WEC, we have 8. We have Porsche, Cadillac, Aston Martin, which is going to debut this weekend for the first time in IMSA, BMW, Cadillac, Lamborghini. So six hypercars that you know from WEC. Lamborghini are not in WEC anymore, but they were last year. And seventh manufacturer Acura.
Yes, the Acura is a bit of a funny story, actually. It's the Acura is called the Acura ARX-06, and it's the successor to the ARX-05, which raced in IMSA previously before they switched over to the LMDH regulations. It's designed by Honda, but it's called Acura. Acura is the American luxury division of Honda. It runs under the LMDH.
It's the American cousin Colton.
Right, American cousin Colton. Well, American luxury cousin Colton wearing a Gucci belt. It is technically an LMDH, and it runs under the LMDH regulation, so it could enter under the LMDH set of rules as a hypercar in WEC. However, also it's technically kind of not, but no one actually knows for what reason it's not a full LMDH. It's confusing, but it's using a IndyCar derived engine, which is kind of funny. It's basically like the V6 twin turbo engine they use in IndyCar, just with regular fuel and not like E85 fuel that they use in IndyCar. And it's the only IMSA manufacturer that doesn't race in WEC yet. They could if they slap a Honda badge on a car instead of an Acura badge.
That's low-key iconic, though. We're gonna move on to the calendar, which I think if you're not used to American racing, if you're not watching IndyCar, it's a lot of new tracks that you've probably never heard of. But to kind of get through the technicalities first, as Sebi has said earlier, IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship, but IMSA for now, is not just an endurance championship. It's half endurance, half sprints. We have 11 different rounds, 11 different races, 5 of which are endurance races and 6 of which are sprints. So sprints are either 100 or 160 minutes. We have 2 100-minute races and 4, actually. I said that wrong. Math is not mathing. 2 100-minute races and 4 160-minute races. And then we have 5 endurance races, and the shortest endurance races are 6 hours. And there's 2 of them. So if we go race by race, we already had the Rolex 24 at Daytona in January, end of January. That was won by Porsche. Then this weekend, hence why we're making this episode now, we have the 12 hours of Sebring, which we're gonna get to soon because we love Sebring. So those are the first 2 rounds of IMSA, the 2 endurance rounds. Then we have 3 sprint rounds. We have Long Beach, Laguna Seca, and Detroit. Then we have the 6 hours of the Glen at Watkins Glen, which is an endurance race. Then we have another 3 sprint races, all of which are 160 minutes. We have Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, Road America, and Virginia International Raceway. And then we have the last 2 races, round 10 and 11, the 6 hours of Indy and the Petit Le Mans, which is 10 hours. I don't know why we call it Le Mans, but it's 10 hours and it's on Road Atlanta. What's your favorite?
My favorite is probably the 24 Hours of Daytona, because that's what the famous Rolex Daytona is named after. But I also really like Laguna Seca, or like what's the official name? It's called like Chevrolet. No, what is it? Where's it? I'm stupid. Acura Grand Prix.
Long Beach.
No, that's Long Beach.
Oh,
Laguna Seca. Motocross de Monterrey. That's like Laguna, what they call the Laguna Seca race, because Laguna Seca is an incredibly technical track, and it's super fun to race, especially with like the faster cars. Down the corkscrew, it's like the most famous corner of that circuit. It's like a blind, almost 170-degree corner over a crest down the hill, and like followed by a right hand. It's insane. I love this corner. But I also really like Long Beach because I'm a huge GTA 5 nerd, and like everything I see in Long Beach is basically on the GTA 5 map. So it's always a funny coincidence. What's your favorite?
I think, well, obviously Daytona is iconic, so I love Daytona. But I think if you've listened to the previous 2 episodes, you know my absolute favorite track from this calendar is Sebring. So excited for this weekend. I also like Laguna Seca because, as you said, it's very, very technical, and it's a short race. It's a very digestible race, if you will. But what I'd also like to mention is that what's specific to this championship is that not all categories race in every race. So the Daytona race, the 24 hours of Daytona Rolex 24 and 12 hours of Sebring have all four classes racing in them. But then, for example, Long Beach only has GTP and GTD. So a GTD category without the pros and hypercars. Then Laguna Seca has both GTD classes and GTP, but no LMP2, second race in a row that doesn't have LMP2. Actually, out of the 6 sprint races, only 2 of them have LMP2.
Yeah, the reason races like Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, the Chevrolet Grand Prix, is that the reason they don't race the GTPs in that race anymore is because of taxes. It is very important, very expensive for teams to fully export their GTP cars to Canada and re-import them back to the US. Because LMP2 cars and GT3 cars are cheaper, they also have to pay less taxes for those, which is kind of a bummer because CTMP is also an amazing track and it's suited the hypercars great. But unfortunately, politics got involved and we now have this.
Which means that out of the 11 races, 10 of them are in the USA, and the one race that is not in the USA, that is in Canada, the hypercars don't race in.
Oh, Canada.
Thank you for that input. Yeah, but now maybe if we move on to the American racing culture, because that's also a very specific kind of aspect of American racing, and that's basically what makes it maybe more lively and more like open to fans.
Exactly. What is great about IMSA is that tickets are even more affordable than they are in WEC. There is no special packages or anything like there's obviously VIP packages for like the ultra rich and everything, but like general fans pay like $60 for like the weekend at like Sebring or whatever, and they have access to everything. They have paddock access, they have grandstand access, they can walk around the track as much as they want, they can go in the open areas around the track, and like they can even walk in the freaking tents of the teams. Like in most of the American tracks, there is no garages like there is in on the European tracks. They have just set up tents outside of like in the paddock area, and fans can just walk inside the tents and ask the mechanics questions as long as they're not bothering them during their work hours. It is more live, more open. You can get even closer to racing than you can get in European racing.
I think in European racing, the only equivalent that comes to mind is maybe European Le Mans series, because it's a very small series, and for 17 euros, you can go to the starting grid as well. And it's pretty open, but the limitation is that it's only LMP2, LMP3, and GT3 cars, and it's usually not the best of drivers. I mean, lately it's been really, really cool with like Arthur Leclerc and Clement Novalak and Felipe Drogovic. And this year we're gonna have Jamie Chadwick and Danny Ugadea and obviously the Iron Dames every year. So yeah, sometimes you have like really cool names, but at the same time like it's not like IMSA where you can just bump into your favorite former F1 drivers basically anywhere you go because it's so much more open. Like European Le Mans Series is the only probably European alternative that comes to mind because even GT Masters used to be pretty open, but it's not anymore because obviously there's like different rules and regulations and such. But yeah, I think that's what makes American racing so cool and so appealing to me. So if anyone wants to send us to IMSA to experience a race, we're definitely open to that.
Please sponsor us.
Please send us to Sebring. I think it's a bit late for that, but
Yeah,
it's
probably.
but I really want to go to Sebring next year. It's out of the entire calendar, Daytona and Sebring are definitely on like my top one bucket list of races I want to attend one day.
Yeah,
Of
for
races
sure.
I want to attend before I die.
For sure, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I have one last point to make about why IMSA is great for fans. The racing can be a lot closer than it is in WEC because of how they handle caution situations or when there is a car crashed on track. Where in World Endurance Championship, they just throw out a um, safety car and a decade-long full course yellow or whatever, which like neutralizes the positions of the cars on track unless it's a safety car, then they get bunched up again. But safety cars have been increasingly rare in WEC after the introduction of full course yellow. So you rarely ever have the cars close together after the start again. Whereas in IMSA, they start with a full course yellow and then they throw out caution flags, which put a safety car in front of the field, which bunches everything up again with each other. And there's only one safety car in IMSA, whereas there's like 3 safety cars in World Endurance Championship. So racing can be a lot closer. It has probably been the closest it's been in years because the quality of drivers and the quality of cars has been steadily increasing. During last year's Daytona 24-hour, the leading battle in LMP2 literally went down to the line. P1 and P2 in LMP2 crossed the line with like what was a 0.05 seconds. Like they literally had to pull out the photo finish to decide who won LMP2. It was fantastic. Great racing.
And you don't really get that in motorsport nowadays.
Exactly.
So maybe moving on to our maybe last few topics of this very short introduction to our favorite North American racing series. As we have said, we have the second round of the championship this weekend, 12 hours of Sebring. Tell us about Sebring, because I keep fangirling in every single episode about Sebring. So tell us about Sebring, and then I continue the fangirling.
I think we briefly touched on Sebring in like our first introduction episode of the podcast.
And last episode as well.
Yeah, Sebring is a classic track. It has been around motorsports for decades. It's a converted airfield similar to Silverstone, but they did not get rid of the original airfield tarmac. It is literally made from like 5 by 5 meter concrete slabs. So it is insanely bumpy. It is very hard for drivers. It is very hard for the machines. You need to be on top of your game during the whole race, or you will literally crash the car on one of the bumps if you're not careful accelerating out of a car. Respect the bumps. Exactly.
Respect the bumps. It's such an exciting race because, as you said, the surface of the track is maybe not what drivers are used to. It's a very technical track as well if you look at it from that point of view. And it's just you have to be good and you have to focus, and there's a lot of funny incidents because
There was a huge crash during like the last laps of like I think it was 2023, where like three of the 3 leading cars went off on the last lap and crashed each other out. It was hilarious.
Yeah, and then when you look on the cars going when they like do close-ups, you can see how they're like going over the bumps and like
Suspension is working
bumping
overtime in Sebring.
Yeah, and that's why most of the tests, if you look at most IMSA tests or like European drivers that go to US to do their IMSA tests, they're usually in Sebring because it doesn't get much easier it doesn't get easier than starting off at Sebring with like the hardest track that you have. But I'm really, really excited for the 12 hours of
We're
Sebring.
gonna do a whole. I think we should do a whole episode just fangirling about Sebring.
I think we should, yeah, because there's so much about this track. Like at this point, if you weren't sure about sending us to Sebring, now you should be, because we're gonna make an entire episode. We have just decided. But to give a little preview of what it's like, because as opposed to WEC, where we talked about WEC before the first race of the season. Here we're entering the second one, so we kind of know who's where and where it's at. Porsche look really good.
They do.
They won the Rolex 24. Nick Tandy, Lawrence Van Door, and Felipe Nasser. And Nick Tandy got his Grand Slam thanks to that.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I did watch the last couple of hours of Daytona.
Well, yeah, Porsche won the Rolex 24, so they look really, really good. Obviously, they're going in to Sebring with the exact same lineup that won the Rolex 24. I personally would really like to see Cadillac do a bit better because they didn't have the bestest start into the year, both in the Rolex 24, both in WEC Jota. That honestly deserves a separate episode as well at this point.
Aston Martin is also debuting in their first IMSA race. They skipped the 24-hour of Daytona to give the car some more development time, and they debuted it in Qatar with 2 cars. They weren't like contenders for the win or anything, but that was to be expected for the first entry of the car in general. And it will also be the first entry of the car in IMSA. So we're not expecting any miracles, but we're always here for a good race, for a good fight. And I hope they finish the race because the car is fantastic. It sounds amazing.
What I would like to point out is that in WEC, it has the typical like British racing green, the dark emerald green color that we're used to from Aston Martin and F1. But in IMSA, it's rocking like a dark blue metallic livery, which I like as well. I still haven't decided which one of those 2 liveries I prefer, but the dark blue looks really, really good on Aston Martin.
Yeah, the dark blue is inspired by the team that is entering the Aston Martins in both WEC and IMSA, which is the Heart of Racing, who have traditionally always been running blue liveries on Aston Martins in both WEC and IMSA.
But in WEC this year, they're green.
Yeah.
So where do we watch IMSA? Because we are all watching. We have decided for you who are listening this podcast, you're joining in and you're gonna watch the 12 hours of Sebring this weekend, and we're gonna tell you where.
It is absolutely free on YouTube for everyone outside of continental United States of America or outside of the United States. They stream their races for free, period. The whole race, flag to flag,
All of it.
with interviews, uninterrupted, with no ad breaks, period. Watch it. It's amazing.
We love that.
And the commentators are fantastic. It's hosted by the hosts of like Radio Le Mans and everything, who are like some of the most passionate and knowledgeable commentators in motorsports. They have so much knowledge. The interviews on pit lane are hosted by a fantastic woman. I'm sorry, I forgot her name. What's her name? Shay Adams, I think. I think it's Shay Adams. She does fantastic interviews. The drivers, the mechanics love her because of her fantastic personality. She gets out the minutest of details out of drivers. So it is a fantastic watch on YouTube. Just search IMSA on YouTube and it will pop up for sure.
It's definitely one of the better broadcasts in motorsport, and they actually show you what's happening. It's full of action, and as we said, Sebring is a great track, and I think for you to start your IMSA journey, the perfect race to watch. To kind of close it off, a few drivers, a few names that you might know. There's a lot of drivers we know from WEC that are racing this weekend. Obviously, there's not that many full season entries of drivers who are doing both WEC and IMSA. As far as I know, there's only 3 who are doing the entire season of WEC and IMSA. Actually, only 1, technically, and that's Earl Bamber, who's doing the entire season of WEC with Jota Cadillac and the entire season of IMSA with the Whelan Cadillac. And then we have Mathieu Jaminet and Matt Campbell, who are doing 4 races each in WEC and the entire season of IMSA. But then for the 12 Hours of Sebring this weekend, we also have Kevin Magnussen, former F1 driver, going behind the wheel of the BMW again. Did already in the Rolex 24 and now in Qatar for WEC. So third official outing in the BMW Hypercar. Then we have last year's WEC champions, Kevin Estre and Lawrence Van Thor. Some former F1 names in the Lamborghini, Daniel Kvyat and Romain Grosjean. Kamui Kobayashi, also a name that you might know. Not racing with the Toyota because the Toyota doesn't race here.
Yet.
But yeah. And I'm going to leave the last one to you because I know how excited you are about that, Sabi.
We have Jack Aitken racing with Cadillac in IMSA as well, and he's also doing the Le Mans 24-hour this year again, which is fantastic. I love Jack. He's such a fantastic driver. He's has an amazing personality. He also races DTM, so I get to meet him quite a bit when I'm in the DTM grid. It's always when we are in DTM grid. Exactly, we're both in DTM.
We both work hard on DTM.
He's fantastic. I love his personality. It's always great to talk to him. He's so nice, and he loves talking to fans, and he always gets excited talking about racing and not just taking pictures and everything because he's a true racer.
And he's in the 31 Whelen Cadillac lineup together with Frederick Vesti and previously mentioned Earl Bamber. And this lineup is actually going to be in Le Mans, except for Earl Bamber being in Jota. So Jack Aitken, Frederick Vesti, and Felipe Drogovic are going to race the number 31 Whelen Cadillac in the 24 Hours of Le Mans as well. So we're going to see them at the big one, as they say.
Yes.
And on that note, I think we're going to finish off this episode of IMSA, also known as the American Cousin Colton, and I hope you get that reference, and if you don't, I'm sorry. Yeah, and watch IMSA this weekend. Make sure to check out our socials. Rate this podcast, give us your feedback, tell us what you would like to hear about. Check out our personal social media, the Everything Endurance Racing social media, specifically the Instagram and the TikTok, because we try to be active there and we share a lot of fun facts. And yeah, see you in the next one.
I will also post you or provide you with the necessary links to watch IMSA again. In the description of the podcast, I will provide you with the YouTube link as well as the full calendar with dates and timestamps to watch IMSA during the season. Anyways, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. We will see you in 2 weeks with the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.